I'd like to introduce our speaker for the day.
Awesome.
Dr. Thomas Chouvenc is an associate professor of urban entomology with the UF IFAS Research and Education Center in Fort Lauderdale. His research focuses on invasive termites, their biology, their ecology, and their control, with a specialty in subterranean termites. So he also coordinates the UF termite course, which he's taken nationally and internationally. And he coordinates the UF School of Structural Fumigation, which is held in November at the Fort Lauderdale Rec Center. So, good morning, Dr. Chouvenc.
Good morning. Can you hear me all?
And so, the County Master Gardener says, welcome, Dr. Chouvenc. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. So I believe this is a joint session between Lee and Seminole. Actually, I'm really excited today to give you this presentation to continue to raise awareness about ongoing issues with termites in Florida, where we have a changing landscape that has been happening over many decades, where the nature of the termite threats is changing, especially in urban setups where invasive species make a foothold and become deeply problematic for communities and also for ecosystems. So I hope I can convince you about these issues within the short hour we have together. And as you get to be exposed to them through the extension programs and through homeowners that look for issues, I hope you are basically aware and therefore know what to do when to take it from there. So let's talk about this today. Before that, let's do a quick zoom out. Just that you know, we do have a beautiful diversity of organisms all around the world, and the vast majority of all known animals are actually insects. It's 1.2 million out of 1.8 million insects. And most of them are beetles, by the way, in terms of number of species. But also, if you look at the biomass of animals on the surface of the earth, you notice that ants and termites represent the 2/3 of the arthropod biomass terrestrial around the world, which is quite massive, which means that ants and termites have kind of won. They are all around the world. So today we do going to focus on termites, and termites are these beautiful creatures. Here you have a soldier of Neotermes, and you can see this beautiful head, this big mandibles, a very unique body, very typical of what a termite would look like if you encounter it. And I think it's a magnificent beast. I'm a little biased as a researcher focusing on it. Now, termites in the world actually represent a group of 3,000 species, give or take, depending on who we talk to. But the vast majority of these species are actually not pests. A small fraction of these can do potential damage to structures or sometimes trees or crops, depending on where you are in the world. They all feed on some kind of lignocellulose, and they are not able to digest cellulose on their own. They require the help of symbionts, microbes who can break down the cellulose to allow them to have access to the resources to digest properly. And all termites, just like ants, are eusocial, which means they have a complex society with a king and queen, with workers, soldiers, brood, and eventually winged termite will fly out and make new colonies. Now, termites are, from our perspective, fundamentally a pest from an anthropomorphic perspective, right? They tend to eat what we build with or cultivate. But the reality is termites only do their thing. They've been doing this for 150 million years, way before we were here. So it doesn't, for them, it's not much of a difference. It doesn't matter if a piece of wood is somewhere on a floor in the forest or in somebody's house, right? For them, it's not something that they care much. It's the same resource. And sometimes some of the species are at the wrong place, but we're the one who've been moving the populations of some of these invasive termites around the world. So we are fully responsible for making them a problem to us, right? Of course, there are millions of termites potentially in a colony. This enough to bring basic entomophobia, which means they're creepy crawlies for the vast majority of homeowners. And if you own a mortgage on your family house, termites are the only insect that really can bring the value of a house down by doing extensive amount of damage over the years. So if we live in Florida, it is very important that you are aware of this because these are part of your daily life potentially, but you're going to have encounters with termites one way or another at some point. It's not, do you have termite? Is most likely when are you going to have termite, if not already? But we have to be conscientious that termites are actually critical players in ecosystem, especially in the tropics and sometimes also in warm temperate, where they are key players in decomposition. In other words, they help break down the cellulose that is stored in leaves and wood and bring it down to the food chain. As a result, they enhance the richness of soil. They can buffer drought by bringing water from deep in the ground up to the surface. And since they're very good at what they're doing, everybody wants to eat them. Fact is, if you go in Brazil or in part of Africa or Southeast Asia, a lot of things rely on food as a stable food source. A lot of birds, mammals, lizards, other insects. It's a very important. So if you remove all the termites from the system, chances the ecosystem would collapse in these systems. Not as much here in Florida, though. So termites are social insects. This is very important because that means we always going to compare them to ants for reasons that are pretty good for sometimes, and sometimes it's a terrible reason. Let me explain. As we create these complex societies with reproductive division of labor, which means we have a queen and in termites a king that are complete control over reproduction inside the colony, which is a biological unit you need to look at. All the workers and soldiers are sterile. Eventually, some individual will become winged termite elite, fly out and make new colony. So they do have this similar life cycle to ants, except that all the ants that you're looking at in the backyard are technically adults. They had to have to go through metamorphosis, the kind of derived wasp, just like the butterfly go from the larva to the nymph to then to the butterfly. Ants have to do the same thing. They're holometabolous insects. Termites, not at all. They're actually derived cockroaches, which means that they're going to stay as a juvenile shape and physiology for the rest of their life and keep molting until they die out of old age, especially for workers. So that's going to have a huge implication when we talk about termite control for subterranean termites later on during this talk. So termites are fundamentally a colony that is a family unit. Here what you have is you have the queen in the middle, you have a king right next to her, and you have workers taking care of them, bringing the food, and the king and queen are solely in charge of reproduction to make the colony bigger. Unfortunately, this phenology, these morphologies make it very difficult for anybody else who does not study termites like I do to actually identify termites because the casts are fundamentally different within a single species and sometimes within the single colony. You can see that the king and queen, have a look, compared to the larvae, the workers, and the soldiers, where they all each have a unique uh, purpose inside the colony. As I said, the king and queen are in charge of reproduction. The eggs and larvae are completely dependent on the workers to grow and develop properly into workers and soldiers primarily. The workers are going to be in charge of finding food, digesting it, cleaning house, and taking care of babies and mom and dad. The soldiers are in charge of defending the colony against predators and competitors. So if we look at real picture of these animals, you can see the eggs, the first and second instar larvae, workers, and soldiers. You can see the soldiers have this unique head capsule with defensive tools to prevent potential predators or competitors to get inside the nest. This is what we call the elate, the winged termite, which some of you may have seen a lot in the past few weeks because it's swarming season for termites, of course. And these, if lucky, will become the future king and or queen of a newly established colony. They fly out, they find a mate, they drop their wings, and they start the colony as a newly king and queen.
All right.
Just those two.
Anything else?
I think there's a background interferences here. So if the king and queen are lucky enough to survive and grow the colony to maybe millions of termites, this is ultimately what the king and queen will look like. The queen will become this massive egg-laying machine, and the king will be here as primarily a sperm donor to maintain reproductive output of a colony. So what is complicated is actually the life cycle itself, make it confusing to know what a termite is and when to find it. When you have a male and female elate, the winged termite, flying out and finding a potential mate, they'll drop their wing, they'll mate, lay the eggs, and the eggs will develop into larger and larger workers until these workers die out of old age within about 3 years or so. Some of them will turn into soldiers through hormonal regulation, but then when the colony is big enough, it can produce what we call the nymphs, and these nymphs will grow wings and fly out of a nest to complete the life cycle. For this, it takes about 5 to 8 years, depending on environmental conditions and the species you're looking into. King and queen are the longest lived insect as reproductive adults in the world. So these king and queens can easily live up to 20 years, probably more for some other species, which means termites have all the time in the world to chew on wood. Their metabolism is very slow compared to ants and bees, where the lifespan is maybe just a month or so, you know? So termite season is kind of confusing for Florida. In Florida, we have 20 species of termite and they all fly at different times of the year. So to find a mate, it's a season for each species. As a result, it's kind of always termite season because you'll see these elates at regular time of the year, depending on where you are in the state. But more important, the colonies that are established in somebody's house are chewing on the wood all year long because it's Florida. It's hot enough to keep maintaining that activity all year long. Therefore, it's not because you don't see these termites swarming that there's no termite problem. It's just that we don't see it. By nature, termite colonies are very cryptic, which means by the time you realize you have damage, it's often too late. And that is a constant for everyone. By the time you realize you have termites, it's often you already have insufficient damage to potentially be fairly expensive to treat and to replace. So these elates and these soldiers and workers are the same thing, except we never see them together almost. One is flying, the other one is somewhere in your walls, you know? Now, when it's dispersal flight season, the swarms, this is what you may see coming out of a piece of wood, a tree, or your house itself. Sometimes they fly inside the structure, which is not a fun experience, I can tell. And this is what the soldier would look like, for one of the species that we have in Florida. So, depending on where you are in Florida, termite problems are different. The closer you get to the tropics, the more termite diversity you have, therefore, the chance of having a potential issue increases. However, there's going to be a confounding factor to this is the higher the population is in cities, the higher the chance for some of these badly invasive termites to establish and become problematic. So if you look at Fort Myers, St. Pete, Tampa, Orlando, Jacksonville, Melbourne, you can see their color is much higher than they should be with a tropical gradient. That's a simple rule. The higher the number of people, the higher the chance of invasive is to be brought up accidentally and established there and now being established forever, right? Now, if you're curious why the Fort Lauderdale Research Center is doing all the termite research in the state of Florida, it's because we have all the cool bugs to play with. So this is why I am not in Gainesville, but in the Tri-County between West Palm Beach and Monroe, basically. So we are lucky to have about 20, 21 species, depending on who you talk to, in Florida from 11 genera. 15 are native, 6 are invasive, and the invasive ones tend to be the most problematic one. I could spend the next literally 8 hours going through these, and chances at the end you may not be able to tell them apart because it took me literally 6 years to learn how to identify termites with having them in my hands. So doing a training on IDing termites hasn't been very productive for me. I've done this hundreds of times. It's actually easier to send me the sample and tell you what it is. And it has been a very successful way. I'll explain you this later. But today, I could talk about Reticulate termes, which is our native subterranean termite. I could talk about Cryptotermes, which is the West Indian drywood termite. But really, these have been in our lives before we were born, and therefore it's not really something that is changing. The thing that is changing is Cryptotermes, which includes 2 invasive species, the Formosan subterranean termite and the Asian subterranean termite, which are changing the nature of pest control in Florida as we speak for the past 20 years. And it's going to be more and more problematic as we keep going. So, I told you I was not going to talk about drywood termite. This is the only slide, actually, I will talk about it. So if you see these wings that are kind of iridescent, depending on the light, they kind of have a rainbow hue. You can see this fecal material, these droppings coming out of piece of wood, your windowsills, the doors, anything that is made out of wood cabinets, kitchen cabinets, something like this. This means you have drywood termites. And that means it's time to fumigate. And that's pretty much it. If you live in a condo or a high-rise building, it's a different problem because you often cannot fumigate unless you vacate everybody, which is very, very expensive. So in this case, usually just getting rid of a cabinet and putting a new one may actually be cheaper for everybody. The good news is, despite the fact that it's fairly ubiquitous throughout Florida, and if you're in some hotspot in Tampa, in Fort Myers, or in South Florida, you have them, period. Everybody does. And therefore, it's just a matter of time. You're going to have to fumigate your house every 10 to 15 years, depending on how bad the infestation is. So that's pretty much it on drywood termites. It's a low-hanging fruit. It's pretty much everybody's problem. And we kind of know how to do this. It's just not fun, but it's pretty much fine. The one I'm going to focus for the rest of this talk is going to be Cryptotermes, the invasive subterranean termites, the 2 species I'm going to focus on. This is a soldier. It has this unique shape. We have a completely white abdomen, the body, beautiful head capsule with nice smooth mandibles, and more important, it has a fontanelle, which is a big hole in the middle of the head that can produce glue that is used as a defensive secretion against predators and competitors. These termites made it to us through boats. 99% of the cases, they are piggybacking, infesting boats somewhere in the world, making it to our shore. They swarm from a boat, and once they establish inland, they're established forever. We cannot put the gin back in the bottle. Now, unfortunately, it's assumed that most of the termites that are making it to anywhere in the world as invaders come through cargo ship. It is mostly inaccurate. The vast majority of infestation is through privately owned boats and yachts. These are fully responsible for bringing termites and shipping termites in and out of Florida. Remarkably, these termites are really good at establishing in these boats, finding a way to survive, complete the life cycle, and establish somewhere else in the world. The biblical reference is truly accurate. Why did we bring them into the boat? That was a true reason there. Now, as a consequence, the Formosan submarine termite is mostly throughout the coast of Florida, from Jacksonville all the way to the Panhandle. And the Asian submarine termite is mostly from Southeast Florida all the way to the Keys. The Asian submarine termite, Coptotermis gastroi, is actually a truly tropical species, and the species is restricted, as well we thought at least, to basically South Florida, while the Formosan is kind of a subtropical species and established all the way to the Carolinas and to Texas. Initially, infestation occurred on the coast for boats, but then movement of infested material brought it inland in cities throughout Florida, far away from potential access to water. But recently, we found a bunch of infestation of the Formosans inland, where there's a lot of boats for the different lakes that are used for leisure. They brought the boat from coastally that is infested inside to be used in a lake, and next thing you know, the termites are brought up in these locations. So it's been happening. This is an old map that gives you where initially 20 years ago where the termites were. In yellow is going to be the Formosan, in red is going to be the Asian, and these colors are going to be used again and again for the rest of my talk. So if we focus to Southeast Florida, so this is basically between West Palm Beach and Miami, you've seen that the species, once established, expands its territory and become fairly common throughout the urbanized area through Southeast Florida. Which means if you live in Southeast Florida, you're very much at risk of these termites. And we are getting towards saturation of the environment within the next 20 years, where these two species will be spread out across South Florida. And therefore, it will be mostly about 50% of all homeowners will be at risk of infestation of one of these two termites. Currently, the Formosan submarine termite, as you can see, hasn't yet spread out to the entire state, because the reality is most of the rural area of Florida, there's not enough traffic to move the species to area where nobody lives there. So again, establishment of a Formosan submarine termite and other invasive species will be mostly initially restricted to big urbanized areas. For the Asian subterranean termites, as I said, it was initially restricted to Southeast Florida, but recently we found them in Naples, Fort Myers, and Tampa. And just in the past 12 months, we had a massive influx of detection from Melbourne, Grand Valkyria, Vero Beach, Port Charlotte, and I believe Bartow. So you can see, we thought this problem was a South Florida issue. It's not. It's not going to be basically more than half of the population of the state of Florida that may be at risk in the medium to long term. So if you think you're too north for that tropical species, no longer. It does follow the change of a plant hardiness zone that the USDA put out just 6 months ago. where everything has been shifting northward, well, termites is a typical study case that says, yes, things are moving northward because it's getting slightly warmer in these areas. Therefore, they can survive the winter and be fully established and be problematic. This is Fort Lauderdale. You can see where the Formosans in yellow are, where the Asian subs are in red. And I live somewhere in that big blob of red, just so that you know. So I do collect termites in my front yard every night when they swarm throughout the season, about 60,000 of them every year. This is Miami. This is Key West. Aha, this is Lee County. So as you can see, we don't have as many location yet for two reasons. Maybe there's not as much termite. Two, they're not reported to us. And that is a sampling bias that we need to fix. So in yellow again, Formosan, in red, the Asian subs, and the triangle in purple are actually the drywood termites. I know for a fact that drywood termites are fairly well distributed throughout Lee County, Fort Myers, and Naples area, yet very few samples are submitted to the termite group at the University of Florida. So anytime you find a termite, put it in a Ziploc. I'm going to explain that in a second. Get it to us and I'll tell you what species it is and therefore if you need to worry about. Remember, we have 20 species, only a handful are problematic, the rest you can ignore. Okay, if we go to Seminole, we can see that the Orlando and the greater Orlando around, you have a lot of infestation pockets of the Formosan subterranean termite in yellow. You can see the Sanford area, Deltona, Orlando itself, and Apopka. But we do have other locations popping up once in a while as they are reported to us, so we can populate that map for you to know where these bad termites are located. And this is actually a Google map layer that you can put on your own phone. And you know, when you pop it up, if what kind of termites have been found in this neighborhood. And if you have Formosan established, for example, well, you know you should prepare because again, it might be just a matter of time. So how to submit a sample? First of all, this map, as I said, is available through our website, the Termites in Florida website. But you can Google and land on this page immediately. And I'm going to actually take it to you right away. Let me close that for a second. And I will share with you the other page, which is this window, which is the termite map that, let me close that so I can, there you go. So this map is interactive, as you can see. You can focus anywhere you want. See these big blobs of sample in Tallahassee? All of these data points have been submitted by a single pest control company who's been populating the map. Same with a couple of samples of companies giving us samples from the Pensacola area. But if you want to focus on Tampa, you can see we have far more sample. We have a bunch of different species, not all of them problematic. Let's see here, Fort Myers, Port Charlotte, Punta Gorda. We just had, I believe, Asian serpent termites sample from Punta Gorda, just that you know. So they're spreading. And you can zoom at the neighborhood level for your own good here. So if you live in Hollywood, Florida, you can see this is mostly a Formosan serpent termite. If you live in parts of Fort Lauderdale, it's going to be Asian serpent termite mostly. Same for Miami with Asian serpent termites. So not everybody is at risk the same way to these different termite problems, right? Let me get back my presentation. I believe I am this one maybe. There you go. There you go. You should see it now. Here we go. You see the screen, right? I believe. Yep. Yeah, you are good. So these are the termites we're talking about. This is Asian serpent termite and Formosan serpent termite. One is an elate, the others are the soldiers. And this is their swarming season. It's pretty much over for both species. We had first the Asian serpent termites in March, April, and then we had the Formosan serpent termites in April up to basically now. And that's pretty much done. We still maybe see a few. What you may see once in a while is these things in your house. One or two of them, they flew from the outside and they died because it's too dry. This is a very different beast than the drywood termite I talked to you earlier. These drywood termites can survive without water in structures and therefore establish with just a handful of elates to find a mate and establish a colony in your kitchen cabinet. These invasive subterranean termites, they need moisture to survive, and therefore elate, the winged termite that fly from the outside, that were attracted to the light or get through a vent in the kitchen or in the bathroom, these are not a problem because they cannot establish a colony in your house. But it tells you that there's a colony of this invasive subterranean termite somewhere in your neighborhood that flew, and therefore you are now potentially at risk to have an infestation of that species at some point in the future, or maybe now you just don't know about it yet. So let's take a look at the impact of this species. This is one of my neighbor who was redoing their kitchen. They gutted the place and realized everything was completely chewed up. This was because of a Formosan serpent termite. Instead of being $12,000 remodeling, it ended up being a $50,000 remodeling. So you can see the cost and impact it can have on regular homeowner like you and me anywhere in parts of Florida. Fact is, a large colony of subterranean termite that is invasive can eat easily about 300 pounds of wood per year in parts of your house if you let them. This is a case in Vero Beach, the Asian subterranean termite, where the homeowner had an issue. Something was happening with the walls that were getting all wrinkled. The pest control came, used a screwdriver, poked for it, and you can see the termites coming out through the drywall, where they fully established within the walls all the way to the attic. These termites create a large colony that need to have access to water. Therefore, the colonies come from the soil. They don't start in structures, really. They come in structure as mature colony with already millions of mouths to feed. They follow conduits, pipes, root systems, walls directly to your house, potentially. If they hit it when they forage underground blindly, they just have to follow it and it takes them exactly where they need to be to find food. And you can see here, the pipe exhaust from the bathtub is completely covered with this mud that brings termites in and out of the structure over time. And that is really the tragedy of these termites is you only have a fraction of a colony in your house at any point in time, which means if you fumigate the house, you only kill a few termites in the house at a time. And the moment you remove the tarp, the tent, termites that are connected to this colony come back to the structure immediately. Therefore, you cannot fumigate for subterranean termites. And because we have drywood termites and subterranean termites, it is so confusing for everyone that, oh, I have termite, I need to fumigate. But the problem is if it's a wrong identification, it was actually subterranean termite, you're just wasting time and money because it's useless. And now you have to do another type of treatment because it's something else you need to do for invasive subterranean termites, which I'll get to in a minute. Here again, this is actually the ceiling. You can see the massive mud tubes coming up. When you see this, you know there's already extensive amount of damage. They're cryptic until they're not, but when they're not anymore, usually it's bad. Again, this is a Formosan subterranean termite damage. At this point, this is what's left of a 2x4 that is supposed to keep the house together. Not anymore. So I'm going to skip on this. The other thing, unfortunately, that homeowners, extension agents, master gardeners, city officials, FDACs, and pest control providers tend to forget is these subterranean termites that are invasive, Formosan and Asian subs. They don't start colonies in structures, rarely, if ever. They start somewhere in the environment, primarily in healthy live trees. And if we keep ignoring that part, that means we won't have a solution. Trees are actually half of a puzzle that we need to take in consideration. And you can see I'm really taking my time on this because I want to make sure you fully grasp the implication. Why trees? This genus, Termites, is about 23 species around the world. Every single one of them have this unique ability to infest live trees and pipe them from the inside while still alive. No other termite species can do that, really. Termites is kind of a king of doing that. This is a gumbolimbo, and you can see it's been chewed up from the inside and collapsed on its own weight. This is a palm. You can see the damage that has been done. It's not really pretty, clearly. This is a sable palm. This is what I love to look for, is the mud tubes coming up. And that it tells me immediately there's an infestation of that tree by one of these two species. Both species have this behavior of doing these mud tubes. The reason is they start in trees. This is a bald cypress, piped from the inside. This is a stranglephag, where you have a carton material, the mud accumulating here between the two root system coming down. This is oak trees. If you look at the texture of the bark and the color of it, you have something that looks very different, that is out of place, right? And if you scratch it, you'll have a termite coming at you. Sometimes they're covering the entire bark. Pruning wound is my favorite place to look for because it's going to be a telltale sign that that mud is coming out, is going to be one of these invasive subterranean termites. This is the Norfolk pine, Araucaria, and you can see that massive mud tube coming up the tree. When I saw that, I could not believe it, how obvious it was. And you can see my hand here to show you the thickness of a mud tube. I never seen that before, to be honest with you. It is massive. Yep, these winged termites find a mate, start in trees, establish your colonies in trees. Again, this is pruning wounds on an oak tree. And when you scratch, this is what you're going to see. These soldiers coming at you because they're really upset you start breaking their house. Ironically, they don't like when you destroy their house too, right? So you can see the soldiers, they have this big hole that can squirt glue. And this is also a telltale sign of that's one of the two invasive species. This is extensive damage, again, on an oak tree. So they've been chewing on that tree for what, 3-4 years, maybe more, who knows? Maybe less. But that means that if you have these mud tubes on that tree that you can detect, if you ignore it for years, once they're done with the tree, what are they going to do? They're going to go to the next place available that has wood, which happens to be your house. So early detection of colonies established in trees can minimize the damage on tree, save the tree, and prevent damage in the structure in the long term. And this is why tree inspection should be a norm for homeowners, pest control providers, arborists, and anybody who spend time with trees and landscaping around houses. Take that map I showed you earlier, put it on your phone. Every time you go to a place and you see these yellow dots or these red dots all over in the neighborhoods, you need to look for trees because this is where you'll find them readily. Now, if you find these mud tubes on trees in an area with no red dots or no yellow dots, I want that sample so I can put that dot on the map because now it's official. This is established in this neighborhood. While it was not before, therefore, it is a new norm for these neighborhoods, right? And knowing is half the fight. Because once you know they're here, now you can do something about it. The establishment of the Asian serpent termite in Tampa was confirmed last year in mid of 2023. When we found out, a lot of folks start looking around in neighborhoods and they find it everywhere, which means it's been there for 10 to 20 years already and nobody bothered to notice. So early detection can really make a difference in protecting trees and protecting structure in the long term. I know it's a lot of work. I know it's a lot of effort. This is my life as far as I know it. I don't expect you to be your life, but knowing about it is really something because once you encounter it, that is a fantastic opportunity to do something about it before it's too bad or too late. Why is that? Well, it's Florida and we have hurricanes. And when with trees that have been chewed up from inside for 5 to 10 years get hit by a hurricane as a direct hit on a Cat 1, Cat 2, Cat 3, these trees are not going to survive. They're going to fall, they're going to collapse, they're going to fall on houses next door, they're going to fall on cars. And guess what? This is not going to be covered by the hurricane insurance because this is a termite problem, not a wind problem. And the confounding factor here is something that the insurance will not want to talk about. This is a pest control issue, right? Now, often I'm asked, okay, what happens if you find a tree that is completely chewed up? Should I cut it down? This is the job of an arborist to do that evaluation, not a pest control provider. The problem is arborists will suggest to cut it down by default because of liability. And even if a tree is perfectly fine, they may suggest to cut it down for reason of covering their own liability. And this is a tragedy because I've been trying to convince people that tree inspection is key to eliminate colonies before it's too late so we can save a tree. And as a reason, this has been used to cut down the trees. Some of the trees are completely irreplaceable because it takes 50 years to get them to what they should be, providing the ecosystem function that they've been providing to urban areas for wildlife and for shade. So I'm in a kind of a pickle here that I want to say we need to look for trees to kill the colonies so we can save a tree, but this tend to be ignored and that makes me a little bit upset. I'll be honest with you. So parts of Florida, especially South Florida, but now apparently more than South Florida, as we just saw, are in the process of irreversibly losing part of the urban tree canopy, which has an impact on structural damage ultimately if you don't do anything about. My advice is check for trees. Once you know you're in an area with established populations of either Formosan or the Asian serpent termites. Now, what do we do? This is where the pest control company comes and can do something about it. Historically, we've been protecting structures by putting liquid termiticide drilled around the house and inject them into the soil. So the termites coming in are basically exposed to it and die. As a result, the colony is repelled by this area and basically is going to find something else to feed for years to come. While it can protect the structure for a few years, it does not take care of a problem as the colony continue to grow, continue to do damage in the neighborhood, can continue to swarm, make more colonies, and therefore the potential for damage to the structure in the long term persists. Ultimately, that liquid termiticide barrier breaks down over times within 1 to 5 years, depending if you have a massive flooding event like we just did in Fort Lauderdale last year, for example, And therefore, who knows what's left in the ground at this point? And then the colony can come back immediately after such events, so it can be a big issue. Alternatively, there's the use of in-ground bait station using chitin synthesis inhibitors. The philosophy is fundamentally different. Here, you don't want to kill the termites as they come to your house. You want to let them feed on the bait station, and within 45 to 90 days, you reach to colony elimination, as the workers don't die immediately next to the treatment. Instead, they go back home, share with everybody, everybody acquire it, and when it's time to molt, remember I told you earlier, termites keep molting throughout their life, the workers at least, not the adult, not the soldiers, but the workers. And as the workers need to molt, the active ingredients in these bait stations will prevent them to molt successfully. They die as they try to shed their old skin and die in the process, which means within 45 to 90 days, all workers die and the colony collapses because nobody's there to take care of the brood, the king and the queen. And they all kind of starve to death at the end. So it's used a tiny amount of pesticide that is termite specific, that is basically has been declared one of the greenest technology on earth in the late 90s when it came out. The baiting process is termite feed on the food, the bait. It takes a tiny fraction of the colony, about 5% of workers. Not much. They're going to share it with everybody, which means you have a spread of the bait. The first few individuals to molt will die in the process, and therefore they're going to be cannibalized right away by the healthy termites, which means you have secondary spread of a bait within the colony. Then the eggs stop hatching, the larvae die rapidly, the workers stop eating and die progressively. The soldiers and queen ultimately die of starvation. Within 90 days, colony is wiped out. The thing is, we do have various products available for the pest control industry. As long as the bait station is impacted by a colony of subterranean termites, then the colony is eliminated. But if there's one colony, there might be more. You want to keep these baits in the ground forever at this point, because if you kill one colony, another one will come eventually if you give it time. So this is a tricky situation that if you live in a Formosan and subterranean termite population area or Asian subs, that means you're at risk forever. It's pretty much the change of the nature. For trees, you can either drill and foam to basically kill all the termites, but it's the same as fumigation. You may kill the termites in the tree, the rest of the colony is foraging for hundreds of yards around in the neighborhood. Therefore, it's a band-aid. I therefore suggest to not do this anymore. Instead, we can use bait that are, I thought I had a picture for that actually. Yes. Using bait to basically put on the active termite, the same thing that you put in the ground. It's a different formulation. You make it wet because you compete with a beautiful piece of wood that they love to chew on. Termites love the moisture, therefore they're going to get into the above ground station because of the moisture. They're going to stay for the food and chew on it and eliminate themselves within 90 days. This is a case where the tree was infested. You can see the house, which is literally 3 feet away, had no damage at all. And I was able to eliminate the colony, save a tree before any damage was detected in the structure. So it can be done. It's just that inspection is key to all of this to make it possible. And you can see here the bait station has been completely emptied out by the colony. So I believe it's a good time to stop. There's another project, but I think I'm running out of time for this. So I would rather leave a few minutes we have left for questions, if any. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Chouvenc. That was amazing. One of the drawbacks of Zoom is that you don't hear all the oohs and ahs, all the reaction from all that you have told us. So I want to just open up the the forum for any questions. So Mariana, you have a question?
Yes, thank you. This was an amazing presentation. Thank you so much. I have a couple of questions. One is, I wanted to make sure I understood, in the tree that was infected, did you use the same type of bait that you were talking about using around the a single family dwelling? Yeah, that one.
Yes. So
Uh-huh.
this is the above ground bait formulation. That is the exact
Yeah.
same thing that you put in the green tubes around your house, except
Right.
it's formulated that to give them to give a bait on a silver platter where the termites are. So in the ground, you have to wait for the termites to find it as they forage in the ground and hit the station and feed on it. Here, if you see a tube, this above ground bait formulation that comes with the bait programs can be applied readily. So if you're covered by a pest control company who have the bait program around your house, if you see a tube or they see a tube or an activity like this, or termite on a tree or in a house, they will put the bait station for free because it's part of a program that comes with a bait program.
Okay. And the other thing is that liquid kind of fencing around the property, right? It's kind of yeah, keeping them away, right? That is that something that is done? I mean, it's, I don't know, it may be cost prohibitively, but can that be done to prevent tree damage future if there is a, if there are termites, or when the termites come to the area? Is that
So
something that can be
yes
done?
and no.
Yeah.
So yes and no. So most of the companies in Florida still are doing liquid termiticide as the only treatment, or the primary treatment to do, which is worked fine with native serpent termites, which I didn't cover today, because native serpent termites are kind of dumb in comparison, and it works perfectly fine with liquid termiticide. But when you come to Coptotermes, which means Formosan and Asians, liquid termiticides have their limits, and in this case, baits have been far more superior in wiping out colonies. So if companies do not provide baits and who do not have access to the above ground bait formulation, which not all companies do for some reason, they do not have a choice. They have to use liquid termiticide in the tree or around the tree, which is a thing you can do. But when it comes to put liquid termiticide around trees, then it comes with restrictions, because if it's a fruit tree, you cannot eat the fruit anymore. And how do you have control on this? If you use bait, you don't have to worry about it, because the bait station, the bait active ingredient doesn't go systemic in the tree. It's only kill the termites, and you can still eat the fruit after that. So this is why, if possible, as a priority, I would go for bait, and that's what I do myself with my own house, basically.
Right.
And but if a pest control provider have no plan B, unfortunately, they have to do this lesser option, or it's up to you to find an alternative provider to provide you with the I would say the better options, and by far the greenest possibility options that you may have.
Right. And the last question, the dry wood termite, that is a native, right?
Well, actually, we thought it was, but it's actually not. It was just, it's been here for 400 years. It was brought up during through the Caribbean, actually through Peru, from the gold trade at the time. So it's been established long enough that we say it's been naturalized, which means it's everywhere. It's basically the same as being native at this point.
And is it do you see the same behavior going into the trees on this, or no?
No.
I think that I understood.
Drywood termite is a very, very different beast, as I said, because colonies are maximum maybe 1,000 termites over 5 years, and the colony is contained in this tiny little piece of wood somewhere in your house. So sometimes a tiny piece of your cabinet, the whole colony is there. They have no access to the ground. They're completely disconnected. And what you may have is one colony in that piece of wood, another one in that piece of wood, and over the years, as they swarm and infest different pieces of wood in the structure, now it's time to fumigate, because you kill every single one of them, regardless of where they are, even the ones you don't see.
Okay, thank you so much. Thanks.
Jan has a question from the chat. Are there any statistics about the number of downed trees in Hurricane Ian that had termites? Do you know of any of that?
Absolutely no statistics, because I believe during this time of hardship, termites are least of their problem. So I'm pointing at the obvious, but the reality is after Hurricane Irma, which was in 2017, I went out in the whole neighborhood where I live, and I've seen a lot of very magnificent oak trees being taken down by the storm, and they were all chewed up by termites. And I'm pretty sure every single one of these trees would still be alive today if they would not have been chewed up by termites. So the impact, because the problem is such a slow motion train wreck, but by the time the wreck happens, which is usually these episodic events from a storm, it's hard to make a connection that, oh, this has been in the making for a decade. And this is, I think, the whole tragedy of this. It's that by the time you realize you had termites, actually they've been here for 10 years. And therefore, it's very impossible to put a number on how many trees are being taken down by storms that should not have been if it not have been for the termites. From my own surveys in areas within the neighborhoods of Fort Lauderdale, my rough estimation is between 20 to 40% of all trees are currently infested. So given 10 years, this 20 to 40% may become 60%, and the 40% now may not be here anymore 10 years from now because of the storm, potentially. So I'm here extremely concerned. And I'm talking as a local homeowner that my neighborhood will not look the same 10 to 20 years from now, because we're going to lose a lot of our urban tree canopy that is somewhat irreplaceable in our lifetimes, at least.
Linda asks, is there a distance from your trees to your house that minimizes the invasion? And how can we submit a sample?
Yes and no. The further, the less of a chance. But these termite species, Formosan and Asian serpent termites, both can forage easily 100 to 150 yards away from where they started. So if you put a data point in your neighborhood, that means the colony, the king and queen, can be anywhere within that big circle around with the 150 yards. It can be anywhere. A single colony can feed on multiple trees and multiple structures, which means as the pest control provider comes and sign a contract with one homeowner, we have a problem, because now potentially these colonies doesn't care about boundaries. And you may have multiple neighbors being infested by the same colony, and therefore, who's paying for this? And you can see suddenly things are getting more problematic. So this is not a solution I have for you, by the way. This is a more technical, political, and financial concern that is beyond my reach. I'm a biologist, remember. when it comes to people's issues, it's something that I don't have to answer because it's outside of my expertise. But I can see that if everybody's on board, and I've been doing this, for example, for some of these, I've been showing up at local civic associations of some of these neighborhoods that are hammered by some of these species. And as a community, they're making a decision on how we're going to tackle this to protect everybody's house. And then the conversation can start. Because until then, I mean, we can barely talk to neighbors sometimes. So can you agree on anything? Termites is the least of a concern again. And actually, it's been used. How many times I had a phone call says, my neighbor has termites. I want to sue them because now I'm at risk. And I'm like, has nothing to do with them. Termites don't care about your house or their house. It's everybody's problem. It's not just their problem. It's not your problem. It's everybody. And therefore, it shouldn't be used as a reason to do what people do, unfortunately, sometimes. Let's try to avoid. Let's be civilized.
Good point. Babu, you have a question?
Yeah, my question is this, is there any naturally available predators for this?
Okay, I have
That's
this
one
question.
Second
I have this
question
question every time, and the answer is no. There's nothing that you can use as biocontrol predators, competitors, pathogens that will actually work on termites. Or do you want 3 billion ants in your house? No, it's not a better alternative. So the greenest technology that we have actually exists, and these are the CAI baits. When used properly, they can do fantastic job. Ironically, I just submitted my paper on the lack of efficacy of biocontrol on termites, so it will be published officially at some point enough. Because I've been asked this question so many times that I said I need to write something to, so I make my case and you can read on your own after that.
and I have another question, which is there a termite resistant tree? Or
No.
trees?
So for Formosan and Asian sun termites, they don't care. They'll go for what available is, and I found them in everything, to be honest with you. They will tend to go if they have like a choice. If there's two trees next to each other and they start feeding on both of them, the one with the softest wood tend to go first. But when we're done with it, they'll go for the hardest one. They tend to avoid pressure-treated wood or boric acid-covered wood um, uh, initially, but give them time. If they have no other alternative, they'll go for it.
All right. Deb would like to know how.
Can we get the address for the map one more time?
Okay, I have better, actually. Let me turn this off, and I will show you that right away. I had the page right there open for you because I knew it was going to happen. And where is it? This one? No. Let me reopen it, I guess. I think I closed it by mistake. Aha, here it is. No, I have it. Let me find the link. Okay. Here we go. So, just what you know, we put that EDIS publication, as you know, is the extension, official extension stuff that you have. Let me do this again. Sorry, I closed it by mistake. Okay, so this is the EDIS publication that we put a couple of years ago with Dr. Chouvenc and Dr. Lylebus in Gainesville. And this is where we provide everything. So this is a distribution and the UF service identification. It gives you the link to the map. This is a PDF you can download, by the way, and click on the links. It gives you a description of all the termites, where they are, etc., etc. And at the very bottom is this one, how to provide termite samples for identification. And you basically have everything. Very important, I need an address, I need a time, I need who collected it, and I need an email contact information so I can email you back our diagnostic. I've been receiving close to 500 samples this season. I'll be happy to continue this until I retire for the next 20 to 30 years. So don't be ashamed. Please send me samples. I'll be happy to tell you where it is because now you know what to do. And two, I can put a dot on the map. The more dot on the map, the more accurate it is and the more useful it is.
Don, you had a question.
Is there ever a time when fumigation is the best option, the first best option?
Yes, actually, there is. When nobody else is doing it. So fumigations are booked from May to June. And then what's going to happen is they're going to do fumigation throughout the rest of the year because everybody is freaking out between May and June because they see dry wood termites flying now.
Oh, yeah.
except that they've been here for years, decades sometimes, and therefore there's no reason to do the fumigation right away because they've been here for 5 years. Therefore, it's not waiting another 6 months that's going to make any difference. I would argue that fumigating in between October and December is the best time because it's a bit cooler, which is nice for the crew that is not baking in the sun on the roof. And two, this is at the time of the year where there's not as much storms, which is another issue, which can mess things up in the scheduling. And more important, this is when they clear the backlog of booking for the year, and therefore you can schedule it at your own leisure instead of doing as an emergency. And therefore it could be cheaper because you're not competing with another 1,000 homeowners who want to have it fumigated now. And you can actually plan ahead. So I'm going to take a few days off to somewhere in North Florida or whatever family you want to go visit somewhere. So for drywood termite, again, it's a lesser problem. We know what to do, and you can do it on your own schedule. There's no emergency to it. For subterranean termites, if you find active infestation, you should do something now, which is primarily using the baits above ground if possible, if you find activity, or in ground for the long-term protection.
Are baits only for subterranean or are there?
Yes, baits and liquid termiticides are only for subterranean termites. Fumigation is only for drywood termite, and you can see why. If you get the wrong species identification, you have a wrong treatment, and therefore it's a big, big problem. Therefore, before any treatment should be done, a sample should be sent to me to confirm which termite you have before you do anything bad, right?
Do the samples have to have wings on them?
No, because sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. Just send me whatever you find, and I'll make sense out of it, hopefully.
Okay.
And Danita asks, here's a comment and a question. Chlordane drench around new home foundations was used prior to the 1980s. What is the half-life of the protection, at least for that house?
That's a fantastic question. So chlordane, dieldrin, heptachlor were a fantastic chemical that stayed forever and killed everything, which is why they were phased out. It's as simple as that. So it's kind of unclear. If your house was sprayed with chlordane 40 years ago, which is a possibility, if it's still active. It could be, to be honest, but I don't have personally seen how things work. I know some of the works are done in Mississippi for the long term. The half-life of chlordane is, I don't know, like 30 to 40 years. So I wouldn't be surprised it's still there, which is good, but could be terrible at the meantime. You know, we found traces of chlordane in every living thing at this point, so it's not a good thing.
Oh, wow. Thank you very much, Dr. Chouvenc.
It's a real pleasure. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and we appreciate your time and energy in teaching us, and we're thoroughly scared stiff. And check our trees. Have a wonderful day. We
Thank you
really
so much.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
Goodbye. Take care.
Very much. Great, great, great.
I